Welcome to True Crime Boss. I'm Jarrett Ferentino. What's missing from the prosecution of Bryan Kohberger? I receive a deluge of emails and a lot of comments on my assessment of the prosecution of Bryan Kohberger thus far. I enjoy everyone's comments and your insights, and people are working really hard and staying very informed and really challenging some of my opinions. And a lot of people say I'm jaded because I've been a prosecutor for 20 years. So be it. I mean, if I'm a little jaded, I'm telling you, I believe I'm calling both sides of the ball. But in an effort to do that, I want to talk about really what's been highlighted by a lot of the listeners as far as what's missing in the case, and certainly things that are kind of jumping out at me. But I want you to remember this caveat. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Remember that, okay? That means if a piece of evidence is missing, okay, or doesn't fit squarely into the prosecution's theory of the case because a particular piece is missing, it doesn't mean Bryan Kohberger is innocent. It also doesn't mean ultimately that he will not be convicted of these 4 murders. So when we're talking about what's missing, everyone kind of hits really the obvious ones that jump off the page here. They claim there's been no evidence of significance gathered from the 2015 Hyundai. There has been no evidence of note gathered from his home in the Poconos or his apartment. First of all, let me stop you there, okay? We don't know, and what has not become public is the significance of what was removed from those 2 residences and the vehicle. First and foremost, folks, remember a knife, certain other electronic devices, and other articles of clothing were removed from, and a firearm was removed from the residence in the Poconos, okay? We don't know what, if any, connection they have to the killings. That doesn't mean they don't have a connection. As these items are removed, they are tested and they are analyzed. So to go out on a limb and say, we don't know, none of that's public, therefore they're of no consequence, it's a little bit of a bridge too far as I'm concerned. Because here's what happens. Right now, the prosecutors and the investigators are processing all of that information. They're testing their evidence, and they are developing their theory of this case. Included in that evidence is Bryan Kohberger's social media history. All of our electronic devices track our comings and goings on the devices themselves, folks, beyond what was gleaned from the towers, beyond the information that was secured from the cell phone providers. So let's not go out too far, get ahead of ourselves on any failure to get evidence from the 2 search warrants, one at his apartment, one at the house in the Poconos, and one on the Hyundai Elantra. And again, whether or not certain items were removed from those places does not mean Bryan Kohberger is innocent. Also, the murder weapon. That's a big one. Everyone says there's no murder weapon. I have prosecuted many homicide cases without a murder weapon. Okay, it's pretty clear. These 4 young people were butchered with a knife. Also, the killer happened to leave the knife sheath at the scene. Okay, that K-bar knife is consistent with the wounds that were found on these young people. That is not a small fact. I had a very similar case where we recovered a knife sheath. We Googled the knife, and it was essentially a Rambo-style knife. I was able to show that the knife that goes into that sheath looks like this to the jury, and that man was convicted for stabbing someone 19 times. So the fact that that weapon was not recovered, you can bet the killer, whether it's Bryan Kohberger or not, dumped that weapon as soon as possible. And there were plenty of places in that rural region between Idaho and Washington to do so. The second thing I hear a lot about what's missing is there's no confession. Mr. Kohberger hasn't made a statement. And that is true, okay? But let's talk about what he did say. He did say certain things that may or may not come into that courtroom. First of all, when he was arrested, if you or I, folks, were arrested for the brutal murder of these 4 people in Idaho, okay, if the SWAT team came into your house and slapped cuffs on you, the first thing you would say to those police is, "Are you nuts? I didn't do this." Okay. Bryan Kohberger said, "Has anyone else been arrested?" No, there's 300 million people in this country. We chose you, Mr. Kohberger. We just showed up here randomly. You happen to be a criminology major, and that's your question? That's the statement? And that question, folks, that excited utterance is going to be admissible in court. And that is a curious statement. It's not an admission, okay, but it is not necessarily the statement of an innocent man. Even the statement of his defense team really kind of jumped out at me. He looks forward to being exonerated. Think about that. Okay, that's why people don't like lawyers, folks. We talk like that sometimes. Like, instead of saying he's an innocent man, he didn't do this, he basically is going to be exonerated through the court system. Essentially, he's going to challenge the evidence and walk out. How about we start with the fact that he didn't do it? Okay, that kind of jumped out at me. The major thing I hear, and the major thing that people ask me about or write in about, is motive. What could be the motive of Bryan Kohberger? And first and foremost, the would-be lawyers of the world say, well, you don't need to prove motive. No shit, right? We know we don't have to prove motive. But one thing I can tell you as a prosecutor, it is important to develop a theme and a story as far as what happened in your case. Motive, although you don't have to prove it, is the key to that story. When you are taking the pieces of evidence and your story of what happened has to comport with the physical evidence that's being presented, it's important that a motive be identified and explored when it comes to Bryan Kohberger. First of all, there is no motive that can justify what happened here. And these four beautiful young people have been robbed of their lives, and their families have had them taken away in such a violent way. But the evidence that's been collected to date will be utilized in developing a motive. Was Bryan Kohberger tracking Kaylee, Maddie, or Zaina on social media? Again, I'm not suggesting that he was. That's yet to be proven. But if, in fact, he was, and if Bryan Kohberger has suffered with social anxiety, and some of the posts that have been attributed to him on Tap to Talk, that app, show that this is someone in pain, someone trying to come to terms with his lack of feelings and things of that nature. And then he starts to see these beautiful people living out this wonderful life. And did he snap? Or was this part of him trying to come to terms with the rage and anger and the screams that people allege he was hearing? These are things that really fit into a motive and kind of make him look culpable in this case. The other thing, folks, and everyone's going to have something to say about this, he kind of looks like a guy that could have done this. Like, that's important too. I've done this a long time, and people are calling me out on the law part of this, but like, we're human. It's got to feel right too. And looking at Bryan, looking at the way he's acting, looking at the way he lived his life, I'm sorry, but it kind of fits. And that is a huge, significant factor when 12 people are looking at this case. They're going to say, well, what do I think? I think this guy's a little weird. And I am not saying he should be convicted for being strange. We're all a little strange in our own way. However, that doesn't help when you're on trial for the butcher of 4 young people. That's my point. And all of these factors, the evidence that we've examined to date, evidence that people claim is missing, and these little other aspects of the case all factor together in the cocktail of this prosecution. One of the things I can't stand when people say a case is a slam dunk. This case is by far not a slam dunk. It is a defendable case. And all of the things, and some commenters write more than once and really try to call my attention to the fact that the DNA is touch DNA, and certainly that's significant. The reliability of that DNA is not as significant as traditional source DNA, and the size of the sample is small and it could be compromised. But I got to tell you, like, the car, the DNA, the phone, all together doesn't look good. what the defense is going to do is attempt to knock out each piece of that evidence, really weaken and hamper the prosecution. And when that stuff starts to happen, motive and those other pieces of evidence that we don't even know about become much more important as well. We're going to continue to watch this, but I encourage you, I enjoy everyone is thinking about this and really challenging our system. Again, that's why shows like this exist. I love to talk about these cases. I love to hear your thoughts. Please continue to share them with me, and we'll continue to cover them on True Crime Boss. Thank you.